Okay, Don, do we have a quorum? Don?
We do. This is
We do
Eric.
have a quorum?
Don,
Yeah.
Don, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Jason. Yes, Eric, do we have a quorum?
Yeah, we have 5 commissioners present, so we have a quorum.
Okay, so I gave the TV folks the countdown. Hope they got it. So we'll have the invocation. So take a moment for that to bless this meeting and all of the participants and help the commissioners to make good and wise decisions for the citizens and the city of Canby. In your name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for joining us, and we will take this opportunity to find out if there are any citizens that would like to have something to say that isn't on the agenda. Don, I assume that there's nobody signed up for that.
John, none that we know of.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the minutes for the March 8th meeting. The minutes have not been finalized. I assume we'll get that at the next meeting. That sound about right, Don?
That sounds correct.
Okay, so we'll move on to new business. Don, that's you now. You're on.
Sounds good. I would like to warmly welcome Jason Padden and James Heeb to the Planning Commission as new members. We're excited to have them. We believe they're going to bring some real solid strength to the Planning Commission, and so looking forward to have them on board tonight and continuing with us tonight in our discussions and deliberations.
Welcome, Jason, and welcome, James. Glad to have you on board.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
So we will now move on to the public hearing. And let's see, tonight there is only one matter before the hearing body that requires public hearing. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received both for and against shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or other land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. At this time, I should have read what it is first. Sorry about that. I'll read that. I'm sorry, I took that out of order. So tonight we will consider a request to develop an 11,500 square foot building with associated parking and landscaping areas. The building will be metal framed with metal siding and roofing. The building will include 13 storage bays measuring 14 feet by 50 feet, each to be utilized for general storage, including recreational vehicles and boats. 3 of the storage bays will allow for drive-through access. An attached storage shop area measuring 60 feet by 40 feet will be located on the north side of the storage bays. This is DR 21-02 Western Storage. Now I'll go back to the format. So I will ask if there's any conflict of interest by any of the commissioners and state the nature of the conflict and the extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate. Hearing no conflicts of interest, Ex parte contact. If any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time.
Yeah, I don't know if it really matters, but I've helped a friend go in and out of there and move his stuff when he moved houses, but I don't know if that matters, but I figured I'd mention it.
Okay, thank you. You intend to participate, correct? Okay. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, we'll have the staff report, and then questions by the commissioners, if any. And then I will open the public hearing portion of the meeting. The applicant will have not more than 5 minutes. Other proponents, not more than 5 minutes. Opponents, not more than 5 minutes. And then rebuttal by the applicant, not more than 10 minutes. That time, I will close the public hearing, and there will be questions, if any, by the other commissioners. And then we will have discussion, and then we will make a decision at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Any questions? Okay, then we'll start with staff report. Don, is that going to be you tonight?
It will be Eric. Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, Eric.
Thanks, Chair Savory. Can you guys hear me okay?
You bet.
Okay. Can you see my screen as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome to our new planning commissioners. Look forward to working with you in the future. My name is Eric Forcell. I'm an associate planner with the Canby Planning Department. And without further ado, I'll jump right in. So the matter before you today for public hearing and consideration is City File DR 21-02 Western Storage. I think I should mention real quick, I've been feeling kind of sick, so if you can't hear me right or I'm like coughing, I'm okay. It's just got a little congestion. So
let us know if you need to call 911.
I will. I think I'll call 911 first, but I think I'll be able to soldier through this. This is a request for a design review approval of an existing use in the heavy commercial manufacturing zone. It's an expansion of a pre-existing facility. The subject property in this case is the pink triangle that you see on this map. This is the current zoning map for the city of Canby. As I had mentioned before, this is in the heavy commercial manufacturing zoning district. It's identified on Clackamas County Assessor's map and as tax lot 31E34C 200. It also is within the downtown commercial overlay outer highway commercial sub-area zone, which we'll get into a little bit more later in the report. Here's an image of the subject property and the existing property to the south. Kind of orient yourself a little bit. There's the Malala logging road trail directly to the north. To the south are existing Western storage facilities. And then the access point is on kind of where Southeast 3rd transitions into South Redwood Street. So the property itself appears to be a legal lot, which is always a consideration in a land use proposal. The current boundary lines were modified through an approved lot line adjustment by the city in 1996. That file is 96-01. According to the file, it appears that the original conveyances and divisions of the property were done lawfully, and staff believes this is sufficient to make a legal lot determination for the subject property. As you mentioned, Chair Savory, the applicant is requesting to develop an 11,500 square foot building with associated parking and landscaping. The building is proposed to be metal framed with metal siding and roofing, and the building will include 13 storage bays measuring 14 by 50, each to be utilized for general storage, including recreational vehicles and boats. 3 of the storage bays will allow for drive-through access, and an attached storage shop area measuring 60 by 40 will be located on the north side of the storage base. Okay, so this is an image of the entire property, which consists of tax lot 1800 and tax lot 200. And what you are seeing is essentially the master planning of the site. The red box below indicates the first approval. We'll call this phase 1, and that was approved prior to the adoption of the downtown core overlay zone that occurred on October 15th, 2008, and that was through Ordinance 1296. Phase 2 and 3, which are in the blue box, were completed through design review 15-01. That was this body that approved that in June 8, 2015. And that approval was granted with a waiver to the downtown commercial area overlays design standards by this body. And then phase 4, which is this proposal, is subject to the public hearing. I bring this up to kind of set the stage for some of the requests that the applicant are asking as part of this proposal. Kind of to instill that this has been what I would call a master plan site. It appears that it was always the intent of the owners to develop this last portion of property consistent with the approvals that had happened in the past. And, so phase 1 was approved prior to the downtown core overlay zone having any effect on design standards or the way buildings could be placed or located on the property. And then phase 2 and 3, which was approved by this body, did have those standards in place, and the applicants requested a waiver, which the Planning Commission did grant to construct that portion of the overall development. And then lastly, phase 4, which is the green triangle, is essentially proposing and asking for the same waiver of the Planning Commission that they received in 2015. This is the applicant's site plan for the property. You can see the storage bays and the shop that I had mentioned. There's an existing stormwater facility that you could see in gray. And some of that will require modification and enlargement in different areas because some of that area will be absorbed by this proposed development. As a side note, I did consult with the city engineer on the stormwater report that was submitted and these plans, and the city engineer did not have any issues with it. So I think we're in pretty good standing there. You can see also the parking laid out, the kind of street pedestrian, curb and sidewalk infrastructure, and the overall layout of the site. The applicant did submit I would say, fairly detailed and well-conceived landscaping plan, which staff appreciated, and I think it does demonstrate some consistency with the landscaping standards. There's a variety of plantings and some discussion about how they'll be maintained, who that party will be, how they'll be watered, the types of plantings and location. Wanted to show that as well in this presentation. And these are some of the applicant's architect's elevation drawings of the actual structure itself. They're quite similar and consistent with the existing buildings on site and the surrounding area. In the staff report, there were some images of the existing property surrounding area that lend credence to the buildings that are proposed being generally of the same character as the existing buildings on site, as well as the surrounding area, which I think is also a pretty important component of the request for waiver of the specific outer highway commercial design standards. So, excuse me, the applicable criteria for this proposal are found in 1608 general provisions, 1610 off-street parking and loading, 1630 CM heavy commercial manufacturing zone, 1641 downtown commercial overlay, 1642 signs, 1643 outdoor lighting standards, 1646 access limitation on project density, 1649 site and design review, and 16.88 general standards and procedures. And these are a page about the comments we've received as part of the noticing procedure. The only comment that we have received is, which I had already mentioned, was from the city engineer, generally discussing consistency with the stormwater drainage and swale modification. At basically end of day today, I had not received any other public comments regarding this proposal. So at this juncture, I'm going to get into a little bit of staff discussion related to the request for a waiver of the outer highway commercial overlay standards. As I had mentioned previously, the applicant has requested a waiver to the design standards found in Canby Municipal Code Chapter 16.41 Downtown Commercial Overlay Zone. The Planning Commission has the authority to waive these conditions pursuant to 16.149.40D. In review of a Type 3 site and design review application, the board shall, in exercising or performing its powers, duties, or functions, determine whether its compliance with the intent, which is capitalized in the code, that is not my emphasis, of the design review standards set forth in this ordinance. I think that the code was designed in a way that Type 3 proposals allowed sufficient flexibility by the Planning Commission to determine whether the project is generally meeting the intent of the code. In my staff report, I think I demonstrate that the applicant does make a concerted effort to meet the design standards of 16.49, which they demonstrated in their matrix. I think with their landscaping plan in concert, the general analysis of the overall character of the area and other factors, that they do strive to meet the intent of the code. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission in this instance waive the downtown commercial overlay, outer highway commercial sub area downtown standards. As I mentioned previously, there was a decision made by this body, DR 15-01, which was phase 2 and 3 of this overall project, in which the Planning Commission decided that they would waive those standards, and that project was built out. I think that would be consistent with the precedent that was already set forth by that previous body. I think it would have to be a pretty strong deviation from what was approved to not consider that in this instance. Another important issue, which I had mentioned somewhat, is that the surrounding vicinity and uses are all very much in character with this proposed use. Images in the staff report and of the surrounding area show similar types of buildings, similar building typology, metal structures with subdued colors. Requiring the applicant to jump through the hoops of the downtown commercial overlay zone in this instance is kind of a little bit of a futile request, I would say. It's not a visible portion of the property. Doesn't interface with the public right of way. It's not going to be something that a citizen would drive by and notice immediately. The surrounding uses include other general storage facilities, a cell tower, Western Storage itself. There's no strong gain to be achieved by asking the applicant to design the buildings consistent with the outer highway commercial design standards. And those were really intended for properties that you see on Highway 99. For whatever reason, this property was included in that overlay zone. I wasn't here to see why that was. It's possible it was a scrivener's or mapping error. But all of that is to say that this property really isn't visible from the public interface. And a lot of those standards are intended for the aesthetic appearance of properties that are along Highway 99. And then I did want to touch again on the master planning. From all indication, staff believes that this property was always intended to be built out as proposed. It looks like this will be the last and final iteration of Western Storage. To kind of backtrack and decide that applying the design review standards on the last leg of the project doesn't really make a lot of sense, because phase 1, 2, and 3 didn't have those standards applied to them. In reality, also, the applicant could have chose a different path, which could have been a non-conforming use expansion. If that was the path they had chosen, they would likely not have to follow any design review standards. The non-conforming uses can be tricky, but I think the applicant has demonstrated that they are doing their best to meet the design standards, but not being cornered into the outer highway commercial overlay specifics. The next point that I wanted to bring up was the traffic impact study requirements. So the applicant has requested that the planning department waive the traffic impact study standards found in Municipal Code Chapter 16.08.150. And found in that code, 16.08.150 sub B sub C, both planning staff and the commission have the authority to waive a detailed traffic impact study or analysis. And in this case, we did so. Partly that was discussed in the pre-application meeting. And there are some reasons that I think are pretty legitimate for waiving that process. One, which was discussed in the staff report and included as an attachment, was that a previous transportation analysis letter was written for phase 2 and 3 of the project. And that letter stated, among other things, that phase 2 and 3 would not generate enough traffic to warrant any further detailed analysis. So and not only did it say, we're not going to look at mitigation measures, it said basically there's not enough traffic generated here to even go into a further detailed analysis to look at that. A traffic analysis letter is a pretty cursory tool in the grand scheme of traffic impact studies. In that letter, it wrote that the proposed use is not a heavy generator of traffic. This use is exactly the same, except that it has no office space, which was proposed in phase 2 and 3. The International Traffic Engineers classification for storage units has a pretty low amount of traffic generation overall. Seeing that there's only 12 units proposed with this project, the possibility of any major traffic flow coming off this property or generated to it as a result of this project just seems extremely low. And then lastly, this phase again is a relatively small expansion of a previously approved use. And so for those reasons, staff did not feel it was necessary to require the applicants to do any further detailed traffic impact study for this project. So I'm going to generally discuss the compliance with the standards with this proposal. And so staff found that the applicant has met the general design standards found in the Canby Municipal Code 16.49.040. And that again is the matrix that you see in the staff report with the points that add up. The landscaping contains a detailed concept plan and planting lists, which demonstrate consistency with the requirements in 1649-80 through 140. The parking standards are met under Canby Municipal Code Chapter 1610. And also the lighting standards and the lighting plan provided are consistent with Canby Municipal Code Chapter 16.43. I did want to mention this component. When I provided my reports to the applicant, it looks like there was some discrepancy on condition number 15, which is in the final order. And basically the way the easement language was written, it was backwards. It should have benefited, it was written basically to benefit tax lot 200 rather than the other way around. So as part of that, there's a clarification to that condition. It doesn't really change the substance of the condition. The intent here is that we want to make sure that each property has the benefit of a storm drainage facility, and that is memorialized in perpetuity through a document that is recorded against the properties. Yeah, that's basically that little piece there. Yeah. So based on the application submitted, the facts, findings, and conclusions of the staff report, planning staff recommend that the Planning Commission move to approve application DR 21-02 Western Storage, subject to the identified conditions of approval. And with that, I would welcome and entertain any questions from the Planning Commission body.
Thank you, and great presentation. Do any commissioners have some questions for staff? Start with you, Mr. Mills.
Yeah, I'll start with one question. Eric, do you know why? First, a compliment on the report, well written, thank you. And then a question on the waiver that was granted in the previous Planning Commission decision. Is there any detail why they granted the waiver?
Yes, Commissioner Mills. The findings are not super flushed out, but from what I understood from reading the report and the final findings and the applicant's proposal, it was largely the same reasoning that planning staff and the applicant are requesting the commission to grant a waiver in this instance. Phase 2 and 3 were not highly visible from the public interface. The surrounding property and character of the area was still largely the same. It felt very heavy commercial feel with similar building typology, similar color schemes. And at that juncture, the request and the reasoning was pretty much identical.
Thank you.
Any more questions, Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, I have some more questions, Mr. Chair, but I don't want to hog the forum. Let somebody else ask a question and then come back to me. How's
Okay,
that?
well, that sounds good. Commissioner Boatwright, do you have any questions? Okay. Commissioner Trundy, do you have any questions? Okay. Commissioner Hutchinson, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Padden, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions.
Okay. Commissioner Heeb, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Forgive me if because I'm new or whatnot, but what exactly are the differences between the outer commercial design standards versus normal? Is that just aesthetics, or is that what I'm understanding?
No, thanks for the question, Commissioner Heeb, and welcome. A lot of them are aesthetics. There are some standards that are related to floor to area ratio. Some of it is about building materials specifically. And then there's some requirements around glazing, so windows, things that generally don't, in this instance, fit super well with the proposed development. They are slightly different than the normal 16.49 design standards. And many of them are related to aesthetics and the appearance from the public interface.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess we're back to you, Commissioner Mills, with your follow-up questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric, you mentioned that staff considers these previous decisions to be precedent. Is that what I heard?
I think in this particular instance, I would consider a decision in 2015 based on a large set of similar circumstances, facts, and proposal with a certain result to be a somewhat precedental decision, especially if the next proposal, this one, contains a very similar set of facts, circumstances, and proposal.
Okay.
What I would not say is I don't think this sets a precedent, nor do we intend to try to set a precedent for all outer highway commercial zones.
Okay.
Eric, could I add to that a little bit as well? I mean, I think just to answer that question a little further, I think where staff is saying this is the last parcel in all the phases, and the intent of the prior phases really, this is consistent with the intent, we believe, of the prior phases. And staff is really seeing this as this property is really committed to a storage type use. And as Eric mentioned, they're substantially complying with all the design standards. I think the only exception really is on the material of the building. And that's, Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's just, we see it as consistent with the previous phases. And I wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
Couple more questions and then I'll get out of your way, Mr. Chair. Eric, you mentioned that I thought I heard you say that inclusion of this particular group of lots in the outer highway zone might have been a mapping error. Is that a consensus? Is that a consensus staff opinion? That's a pretty broad statement.
No, I don't speak for as a consensus opinion. My personal staff opinion is that when I looked at this, it is kind of juts out from the outer highway commercial zone overlay area without a clear reasoning why. It doesn't generally seem consistent with most of the other property in the outer highway commercial zone. The other part that is when you read the intent and general standards of that zone, it doesn't really seem to neatly fit with what is stated there. Given its distance from Highway 99 and any real public street interface, it seems like it could be an anomaly, but I'm not vouching for that particular statement per se.
I see what you're talking about there, though. Last question is, we've talked about, you've described this project as being the final phase of a 4-phase project. And the first approvals happened in, I think it's 2001. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So we're now 20 years down the road and phase 4 is now being constructed. And I'm assuming that the detail available in 2001 and 2008, for that matter, on what phase 4 was going to be was not much other than it might be storage. Was there more information than that, or was it kind of a blank, empty lot that was a future project? I guess what I'm getting to is I'm a little troubled by what I'm going to use the word grandfathering of previous phases that happened over a period of 20 years. And now we're saying this is phase 4. It's the same thing. We ought to just go along with it. And I'm not suggesting it shouldn't be done the way it's doing it, but I'm very troubled by applying that kind of logic of phasing and grandfathering as conditions and codes change to projects and saying that they don't have to comply with those, or that it isn't necessary that they comply with those. So I have a concern there. And correct me if I'm wrong, was there more information known about phase 4? I politic there a little too much.
No, and I think where you're coming from is a valid point. I think the overall planning of both properties and the site in general is one component of many that led staff to recommend the waiver in this instance. I don't think the mere master planning on its own accord is sufficient in this instance to grant a waiver.
Okay.
So to answer your question also, I'm not sure if the exact, architectural plans were conceived of in 2001. But it's clear from the 2015 decision that this appeared to be part of the full product and end result of the site. Anything else going here would be somewhat odd. I suppose it could be, there could be a chance there would be something different that would go here, but it's not such an extreme request that it seems kind of beyond the pale. So to summarize, I don't think the mere master planning of a process is sufficient alone on itself to grant a waiver.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks again for the clarity and the good work. Mr. Chair, that's all I've got.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Any other questions by any other commissioners at this time? Okay, then we will move along to the applicant. And so we'll hear from, yes, there you are. Oh, Pat, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Chair Savory.
So long time no see.
Yes. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Pat Sissel with Sissel Engineering, 375 Portland Avenue, Gladstone. I'm here this evening to present this application on behalf of Kim and Rob Meeks of Western Storage LLC. And I'd just like to begin. I'd like to thank Eric as well for a very well-written staff report. I think he's covered most of the issues here. Eric, I'm wondering if maybe you could just give us the site overview. That might be helpful. Maybe the one that shows the phasing. That might. So while Eric's getting to that slide, there we go. Thank you. So I want to make just one clarification. So the original building on the site, phase 1, is the Canby Business Center building. That site was originally approved and constructed in 1996. That's a 12,000 square foot building. It's got a broken face block exterior and a metal roof, and it's home to several business offices. The building immediately north of phase 1 is the Western Storage Building 1. And it was shown on here as phases 2 and 3 being completed in 2015. Western Storage Building 1, which is the second building on the site, was actually constructed in 2003. And that was a metal building, metal roofing, steel frame construction. And that building predated the downtown Canby overlay zone that was put into the code in 2008. In 2015, the third building, we'll call it phase 3, it's Western Storage Building 2, came before the Planning Commission, and it is a similar material and similar design to phase 2, which is architectural materials and finishes that have the metal clad siding, metal roofing, and steel frame construction. And at that time, it was known that a building would be placed on phase 4 just because of the odd shape of phase 4. It wasn't really projected as to what that building would look like, although we knew that, there would be a building on that site in time. I think just given the odd shape of that piece, a building was never shown, although it was always intended to be placed there. My recollection is that the first building to seek a waiver of the downtown Canby overlay zone outer highway commercial area in this area is actually the Proactive Sports Building, which is located just to the west of phase 3 and a little bit to the west of phase 4. That's a large building that was approved by the Planning Commission in 2014. And as I said, phase 3, the Western Storage Building 2, came before the Planning Commission a year later in 2015. And we were told by staff when we started the process that Proactive Sports seek the waiver for the standards of the downtown Canby overlay zone due to its lack of visibility from the public right-of-way. And Proactive Sports is similar to the Western Storage buildings on this site, is metal siding, metal roofing. Proactive Sports does have a concrete stem wall around the base of the building, but otherwise it's metal siding with very few windows and a few doors. So again, the proposed buildings on this site are hidden from the public right-of-way. The building will be located, it'll take access from Southeast 3rd, South Redwood, but it's 450 feet back from off the public street. And so there is very little visibility from the public right-of-way. The building can best be seen from the logging road trail pathway on the eastern side of the site. So if you've ever walked or ridden your bike along the pathway, you've looked down into this site and you've probably seen the other buildings that are on site. The DCO, Downtown Canby Overlay Zone, is Chapter 1641 of the Land Development Ordinance. And the applicability portion of the Downtown Canby Overlay Zone describes the outer highway commercial area as it extends along Highway 99E, both south of Elm Street and north of Locust Street. So it specifically mentions it extends along Highway 99E. It goes on to say this area is quite different from the core commercial and transitional commercial areas by nature of its highway access and orientation. The section 1641.060, the Downtown Canby Overlay Site and Design Review Guidelines, when describing the outer highway commercial sub area, it mentions that the design focus in this area is less about creating a high quality pedestrian experience and more about ensuring that automobile oriented design is built to the highest standard possible. The result will be automobile oriented highway uses that demonstrate high quality design. So again, this section mentions highway uses, as the other section mentioned highway access and orientation. And this site does not have highway frontage, access, orientation, or visibility. When you're heading north out of Canby on Highway 99E, when you pass through the stoplight at Pine Street and you look to your right, first there's Canby Builder Supply, and then there's Millar's Point S Tire, then there's Northwest Self Storage, and then you have the logging road trail bridge and the berm that extends beyond the bridge. Then you've got the railroad tracks, and then Fred Meyer's and Denny's in the Canby Market Center complex. And the Western Storage site is tucked back in behind all those other buildings that I just mentioned, but it's not seen from the highway. And this is why we're requesting the waiver from the Downtown Canby Overlay Zone, because the zone specifically is tailored to highway access and highway orientation, and that's what the purposes of that overlay zone are for. And this site has no highway access or orientation or visibility. On the opposite end of the south on Redwood Street, Third Avenue, again, the site is more than 450 feet back off of Third Street. And so it's not really seen from that direction either because it's hidden behind the other buildings that are on site. To the west is Second Avenue that runs behind the backside of Canby Builder Supply and to some other industrial buildings off to the west. You can see a little bit of it where it says, where that red arrow points to existing Western storage facilities. That's actually private property. The public street for Second Avenue ends a couple hundred feet to the west for Southeast Second. And so again, where this building will be placed, it's back in that triangular area where it is very difficult to be seen from any public right-of-way. Nearby buildings to this site include the Western Storage Buildings 1 and 2, which are both metal siding, metal roof buildings. And then just to the west, you can see the Proactive Sports Building. And that is where the red arrow, it goes from subject property into the site that crosses through the Proactive Sports Building. Again, that's another building that has metal roofing, metal siding, and is in the downtown Canby overlay zone, outer highway commercial area. So this, and then in the northwest off-site portion of this site is Northwest Self-Storage. And those are wooden, there's 7 single-story buildings having wooden siding with metal roll-up doors and composition roofing. And in the back southeast corner of that site, nearest Western Storage site, is a cell tower and a couple small buildings with equipment for the cell tower. And the whole area is surrounded by chain link fencing. And I'd just like to wrap up by saying, as the staff noted in the staff report, that a significant component of the downtown Canby overlay zone is the appearance and the interface with the public realm. And this project is unique in that the lot and the project site are largely obscured from the public. And therefore the intent of the code is largely lost. And it does not appropriately fit this site any longer or this development proposal. This whole area contains metal structures, but the DCO overlay prohibits metal structures, and that's really the reason for the request for the waiver. We feel that requiring a different type of material for the sake of satisfying the overlay zone really negates any of the tangible benefits foreseen by the overlay zone itself. As Eric mentioned, the applicant is requesting the minimum amount of waiver required to complete the project as planned. And the applicant could have followed another path, which would have been a non-conforming use permitting process that may have lessened the design requirements. However, this is the path that the applicant took on the last application, and the applicant feels that the application resulted in a good-looking building, and wants to make sure that this application will end up having an attractive building on site that will be consistent with the surrounding uses, and therefore that's why they've chosen the path that they have. I think that wraps up my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the traffic study or stormwater or any questions that commissioners may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Great presentation, Pat. Any questions by any commissioners? Again, we'll start with you, Jeff.
No questions.
Okay. Mr. Boatwright. I don't even know if Mr. Boatwright is in. Commissioner Hutchinson.
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Patton.
No questions.
Commissioner Heeb.
Yeah, no questions.
Commissioner Trundy. Okay. Don, are there any other proponents that you know of that would like to speak on this?
Unless Eric has others, I do not know of any.
Okay. Do you know of any opponents?
I don't believe there are any. Eric, are you aware of any?
I'm not aware of any opponents present at the meeting.
In that case, I assume there will be no rebuttal since there's no point. At this point, I will close the public hearing and go back to any questions that other commissioners might have for staff or the applicant. Okay. Hearing none, then we will move along, and I will entertain a motion to approve DR 21-02 Western Storage, the request to develop an 11,500 square foot building with associated parking and landscaping areas and metal frame with metal siding and roofing. The building will include 13 storage space measuring 14 feet by 50 feet, and each utilized for general storage, including recreational vehicles and boats. 3 of the storage bays will allow for drive-through access. An attached storage shop area measuring 60 feet by 40 feet, located on the north side of the storage bays. Again, I'll entertain a motion to approve DR 21-02.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Patton. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll
Second.
second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Heap. All in favor, say aye.
Mr. Chair,
Oh,
is
yes, Jeff.
there going to be an opportunity for some discussion before we vote? Or
Sure. I would be remiss. I apologize. So let's have.
I don't have any questions. I don't have any questions, but I do have an opinion, and I guess I wanted a concern. I'm going to float it to staff, and then I'm going to vote in favor of this proposal. But I'm not voting in favor of the proposal because of any of the phasing arguments, because I don't consider them to be fully supportable. All the other reasons offered are very supportable, and that's why I'll vote for this. But I feel like over a 20-plus year period, we're still using phasing to avoid using a code. It's just not a viable argument to me. The other option, the other arguments that are made for not using the OHC, I consider to be valid and supportable, and that's why I'll vote for it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Any other discussion from commissioners?
This is Jason.
Yeah. Yes, Jason.
I guess one of the things that comes to mind, and being new to the commission, I don't know if this is possible. Is there a way to sort of call or identify any future properties that are in these zones that could potentially be eligible for these sort of exemptions in preparation for them, rather than them coming up 20, 30 years down the road? Is that in the purview of the Planning Commission? Is that something that the Planning Commission or the City Planning Department is able to do?
Don?
Commissioner, Yeah, Commissioner Patton, just to address that, I think there's a set of quite unique circumstances here that apply to this property. I mean, staff could absolutely look at those issues. I think how we're seeing this, and I appreciate Commissioner Mills' comments, there's a number of things that are kind of going on in play here. We're seeing, I think, really a strong argument in this case that they're substantially complying with the design standards, even though they're seeking a waiver, which staff supports. And the public interface issue about not being visible are very strong arguments for why we see this as consistent with that waiver and also consistent with the 2015 decision. I think staff can absolutely take a look at these circumstances where there's common ownership and there may be the likelihood of this happening. But I do think this is quite a unique situation that will not come up that frequently. We kind of struggled with this as staff in terms of how to approach it, but we feel that there's a strong argument in favor of approving this project.
Thank you. Thank you. Did that answer your question, Commissioner Patton?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So it has been moved and seconded that we approve DR 21-02 Western Storage. So all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. It's approved. Now we will move on to final decisions, which is again DR 21-02. I will entertain a motion for a final decision to approve DR 21-02 Western Storage.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you very much. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? Thank you very much. We will move along to items of interest from the planning staff.
Commissioner Savory, I do have a few items just to bring Planning Commission up to speed on.
Okay.
We're addressing a few things that at some point the Planning Commission will be seeing as well. There are several housing bills that are in play here. Housing Bill 2001 and Housing Bill 2003. Housing Bill 2003, I'll focus on that one, which is the housing needs assessment, is something that is adopted by the state. We're going to be going through a process to evaluate housing needs throughout Canby according to that House bill. The deadline for adoption is December 2022. So there is some time for this, but just to let the Planning Commission know that this will be something at some point that you'll be seeing in terms of direction on that as that moves forward. And just want to let you know that. And then also we're going to be working on that Housing Bill 2003 housing needs assessment this over this next year. There's also an economic opportunity assessment, which is going to be on employment lands, which will also be looked at over this next year as well. Both of those will start to define the needs base for housing, how much employment land. We're paralleling that effort with an inventory of residential and industrial lands that are vacant and available for development, and what that supply is over what period of time, to be proactive to look at the city's needs over time for both residential and industrial land. So those are all kind of in play at this point. So over the next year, we'll be providing some updates on those items.
Okay, thank you. Are on 2001 and 2003, are there any specific goals that they're trying to achieve that you can share with us?
I'll touch on Housing Bill 2003. I think really the bottom line on that is looking at the needs of the community, all segments of the community, and trying to figure out, what availability is there, dealing with all issues from affordability, and then what kind of housing products should be developed. And will the city want to look at things as incentive based to meet some of those objectives? Those will be council decisions that will have to be discussed. But there's a variety of things. Part of what we're trying to do first is define what the need is, and that's part of that first step. Housing affordability is challenging, I think, across the state in general, as well as the nation. And so this is the legislature's way of trying to address that globally through housing needs assessments through each city and through the counties and cities, so that there's an assessment of that and looking at that in pretty precise detail about, it gets into zoning issues and those kinds of things that would be looked at in the future. It also would look at opportunities if people have properties that, they would be interested in having, residential property development on that. We'd be looking at that issue as well.
Okay, thank you. I see that we are all.
Real
go ahead.
Quickly, in regards to that, what I'd be curious to see with that is, several years ago, the city worked hard to sort of widen the boundaries when they were doing the urban and rural reserve. And there was a certain amount of land that the city figured would be needed for its growth over a period of time. And over this time, how much of that land has been eaten up for housing and commercial purposes, and if it continues at that rate, when that land would run out. I don't know if that is something that would be included in this as well.
It would absolutely be part of what we would be doing. I mean, and not directly necessarily for House Bill 2003, but I'd see that as a parallel effort, because ultimately this will lead to a comprehensive plan update for that. And that's a critical path item, as I see it, is to looking at what the land needs are for the community as a whole, so that we're being proactive and we're not in that place where there isn't sufficient, let's say, employment land or residential land. So to your point, absolutely would be looked at. Whether or not the city does an expansion will be we're starting to look at those issues. That will not be over next year. That's probably the following year. We'll be looking at those things about the comprehensive plan and should there be an expansion to address those needs based on absorption.
Thank you. I also see, are any other items of interest that you would like to bring up?
No, that was it, Commissioner.
I see that we have our next scheduled meeting is April 12th, Monday, April 12th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
We're still on for that, okay? Are there any items of interest from planning commissioners that you would like to direct to the staff? Yes. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening, and we'll see you all on April 12th.